In this movie, I'll show you how to modify an existing crop boundary, and along the way, I'll demonstrate the various grid options that are available to you, and I'll also show you how you can rotate an image using the crop tool, which will allow us to straighten this crooked horizon. So anytime you want to edit an existing crop, all you have to do is switch back to the crop tool, which again, you can get by pressing the C key, and then you'll see your crop boundary. And notice, as soon as you set in modifying it, and as long as you're in this crop editing mode, you will see by default the rule of thirds represented by these grid lines. Now, the rule of thirds specifies that if you divide an image into thirds both horizontally and vertically, that you want the subject of your photograph to be located at an intersection of two of those grid lines. But that's just one of many design rules at your disposal. If you go up to this overlay options icon and click on it, you'll see all kinds of other design rules, such as these inset triangles that you might take advantage of. We've also got the golden ratio, and just in case you're wondering legitimately how in the world these things work, the golden ratio specifies this. It goes way back. It's one of those Renaissance rules that specifies that area A, which is this area right there, and area B is right there. The ratio of area A to area B is the same as the sum of the two, that is, areas A and B, to area A. Really what it comes down to is that, again, you want to put the subject of your photograph at one of these intersection lines. And if you want to go even deeper, you can check out the golden spiral, also known ultimately as the Fibonacci spiral, in case you studied art history in school. The idea is that we've got a series of golden ratios going on, and we have arcs inside of those golden ratios. So we've got a big arc, and then a half arc, and then a quarter arc, and so forth going on throughout this. And we want this guy to be positioned toward the center of what is ultimately this kind of nautilus shell here. Problem is that we don't have enough image to make that work, so I'll go ahead and drag him back. And if you want to move the image inside the crop boundary, you have to drag inside the crop boundary. That's very important. So what you can do when you're working with the golden spiral is you can change its orientation. So I'll go ahead and click on this icon again, and notice that we have Cycle Overlay, which has a keyboard shortcut of O, which will take us from rule of thirds to grid to diagonal and so forth. And then, when we're working with the golden spiral, we have cycle orientation, which is Shift-O. And if you put any stake in the spiral, then you'll want to know this keyboard shortcut, because choosing the command one time does not do the trick. In fact, I have to press Shift-O several times in a row to get what I'm looking for, which is the spiral oriented this way. And then I'd move the guy toward the center of the spiral. You know, mas o menos. It's not really important that you get him dead on. Now, in addition to using a grid in order to position the subject of your photo, you also have the option of rotating the image, and you do that by moving your cursor outside the crop boundary and dragging. And as you do, notice that you'll see a grid which will help you decide what's plumb and what's not. And I also see this heads-up display to the right-hand side of my cursor, which is telling me that I've rotated the image negative 2.9 degrees. And then I'll go ahead and release in order to apply that initial rotation. Now, at this point, I'd really like to keep seeing those grid lines because I'd like to make sure that I got things exactly right. And if you want to work that way as well, then you return to the overlay icon and you switch it to grid. And then you'll end up seeing that grid like so. And then if you like, you could zoom in until the grid line aligns with that horizon as I'm seeing right here. And now you could decide if things are exactly straight or not. And it looks to me like they're not, because I've got the horizon right there in that portion of the grid line, right at the cliff. But over here on the right-hand side, I'm a little off. So I'm going to drag down just a little bit outside the crop boundary once again in order to rotate. Now it's telling me negative 2.4 degrees, and that's the combined rotation, by the way. That's the total rotation. And now it looks almost right. I'm just a little bit off. And the reason I'm taking this so seriously is because this is going to be a destructive modification. So I've got to get it right the first time, or I'll have to press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac and try again. And that looks good. It looks like I'm evenly above the grid line like so. And I'll press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to zoom out. I'm way too far out. And notice, by the way, that I can see the entire image size right there. I'll go ahead and zoom back in a little bit, however, so that I can better see what I'm doing. Now, I want you to understand. Let me zoom out again. I want you to understand that this is indeed a destructive modification. And the reason it's a destructive modification is because Photoshop has to rewrite every pixel in an image in order to rotate it. And the reason Photoshop has to do that is because, after all, every pixel is an upright square. And what we're asking Photoshop to do is rotate the squares, and it can't do that. So it has to rewrite them instead. So make sure you've got that rotation right before you press the Enter key or the Return key in order to accept that change, which I'm going to do right now. And we end up with this straightened version of the image right here. Now, he's looking a little crookedy. His chair isn't. His chair's straight up and down. Apparently, his table's at an angle, but, you know, that was his choice. I'd rather get the world straight than worry about the axis of his desk. But, of course, you can make your own subjective decisions. Anyway, that's how you take advantage of the various grid options and how you rotate an image, albeit destructively, using the crop tool.